What's up, everyone? After the life of swords and exploration of the Vikings, we now ascend to the pinnacle of the world's oldest and most magnificent civilization. What would your life be like if you were born as a pharaoh, a living god, in ancient Egypt? You are no longer just a king, but the son of Ra and the sole guardian of cosmic order on Earth. Let's explore my life, the burden of building monuments, and the quest for eternity under this divine responsibility. Don't forget to like the video, and I truly enjoy reading your own what-if comments. Life began not merely as the heir of a dynasty, but as a living manifestation of the god Ra in a sacred and magnificent chamber. The moment I was born, the destiny of all Egypt and the continuity of cosmic order were placed upon my shoulders. This was a terrifying privilege that no ordinary human could ever bear. I was the master of the people, the commander-in-chief of the army, and the chief priest of all temples. My every breath, every decision, affected not only my mortal existence, but also the integrity of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, and even the fertility of the river Nile. The heavy, spiced fragrances of the palace mingled with the silent, trembling reverence of the hundreds of servants surrounding me. The whispers of the coronation ritual filled my ears from childhood onward. Every movement of mine had to embody the flawlessness expected of a god. The slightest error brought with it the fear that it would usher in disaster and chaos is fit to Egypt. High-ranking priests meticulously checked the color of my skin and the sparkle in my eyes, ensuring that every sign emanating from me reflected the god's approval. This divine power was absolute, but it was also a heavy, golden chain, as I could be held responsible for the collapse of Egypt at any moment. The first thing I learned growing up was the truth that I was not a man, but a piece of eternity, and this reality deprived me of all childhood joy. The coronation was not merely a political formality, but the most sacred moment symbolizing the thousands of years of Egypt's unity, placing the double crown Eshant, which unified the two parts of Upper Egypt, the white crown, and Lower Egypt, the red crown, upon my head indicated that I was the sole, legitimate ruler of the two lands, Tawe, under a single will. Every curve of this heavy crown represented the interests and sensitivities of a different region. The ceremony proclaimed me not as a mortal ruler before the people, but as a sacred entity who governed the Nile and the sun. My body was anointed, bathed in incense, and my face was consecrated with the makeup of the god's coal. Performing this ritual imposed upon me the obligation to maintain constant balance and to be a divine mediator unifying the interests of the empire's diverse, and sometimes hostile, regions. The weight of this ceremony pierced my soul, going beyond the weight of the cloak and the Nenes headdress on my shoulders. The primary purpose of my existence was not just simple governance. It was to maintain my cosmic order. Mat represented not just justice, but also the concepts of truth, balance, harmony, and the cosmic rhythm that sustained the universe itself. If I, as Pharaoh, allowed the slightest injustice or skipped a ritual, this would result not only in a political crisis, but could lead to chaos isfit, swallowing the waters of the Nile, the drying of the crops, and the collapse of Egypt. This fear compelled me in every decision to consider the requirements of the thousands of years of sacred tradition and cosmic balance instead of my personal desires. This heavy religious and philosophical burden dictated my entire life. I was not just a king, but the guarantor of the world's foundation, and the weight of this responsibility crushed my shoulders every day. Being Pharaoh was not a personal triumph, but a continuous sacrifice and a cosmic service. The river Nile was not only the symbol of my economy, but also my divine authority. The annual flooding of the Nile determined all of Egypt's prosperity and life. These floods were under my sacred control. My duty was to appease the spirit of the Nile Hopi and rely on the priests and Nilometer readings that correctly predicted the water levels. A failed flood or an excessive one would lead not just to famine, but to the questioning of my divine power. Grain taxes and the meticulous management of the granaries were the main mechanism sustaining the vast bureaucracy. Every drop of the Nile was my responsibility. This showed that my power lay less in the army's sword and more in my ability to manage the fertile mud of the Nile and the delicate rhythm of the flood. This was my most fundamental duty, constantly forcing me to be vigilant against the might of nature. My greatest architectural ambition was not just to build a tomb, but a spaceship for my eternity. The pyramids at Giza, the temples at Karnak, were tangible proof of my power and quest for immortality. The construction of these colossal projects consumed the entire country's resources, the labor of thousands of workers and engineering genius. Slaves, artisans, and farmers were compelled to work on these monuments during the Nile's flood season. On the walls of the temple, my relationship with the gods, my war victories, and my reign would be immortalized with gold and lapis colors. I lived under the compulsion to build these eternal structures, for these monuments were the sole guarantees necessary for my Ka life force and Ba soul to return in the afterlife. Architecture for me was not an art, but the inscription of eternity onto stone. The army was my instrument for maintaining Mat. As the commander-in-chief of the army, I had to keep Chaos Isfit outside the borders of Egypt. War was not just a political move, but a divine imperative. I had to personally lead the army, fight at the forefront, and return with victory. The sound of spears and arrows was the music of my divine authority. Defeat or retreat was not just a loss, but a tangible manifestation of the weakening of my power and my covenant with the gods. I constantly inspected my armor, my chariot, and the courage of my army, for weakness could instantly lead to enemy invasions and internal turmoil. Every victory of Egypt was a part of my divine status and eternity. Ruling a vast empire meant being crushed under the suffocating weight of bureaucracy. This weight was heavier than the stones of the pyramids. My most important aide was the Vizier Jati, who was ultimately responsible for all administrative, financial, and legal affairs. The Vizier presented thousands of official documents, complaints, and reports to me every day. My duty was to extract the correct decisions that would uphold Mat from these piles of papyrus. Bureaucratic error or corruption was as dangerous as a flood on the Nile, for it shook the people's faith in justice. I had to oversee not only the construction of temples, but also the discipline of officials and the transparency of the tax collection system. Being a pharaoh required being a disciplined administrator as much as it required being a god. The royal harem was not only a residence, but also the center of political alliances and dynastic continuity. In Egypt, there was a tradition of marrying one's sister incest to maintain the purity of the royal blood. This was not just a tradition for me, but a divine necessity. Every wife in the harem, the great royal wife and secondary wives, could represent a different Egyptian power, foreign principality, or neighboring state. My duty was to manage the delicate balance of power among the women in the harem, as one queen's intrigue could plunge the entire dynasty, or even the country, into civil war. The harem was a scene of secret diplomacy, behind closed doors and behind the veil of beauty and luxury, where the future of the empire was determined. My divine status required me to be the chief high priest of all temples. This was my most sacred and most exhausting role, I was the sole, legitimate intermediary between the gods and the people. Every day, I offered sacrifices on golden altars in the temples, personally led the rituals, and oversaw the immense economic power of the temples. If I made the slightest error in these rituals, the people's faith in me would be shaken, and the breakdown of Mat would be inevitable. The wealth and political power of the temples were even greater than that of the vizier. My religious role was heavier than my political role, for the people's unconditional faith in me was the main pillar of the empire's stability, and this faith was a constant burden on my shoulders. History held the potential for a pharaoh like me to go against traditional beliefs and enact a radical reform, like Akhenaten, the Amarna experiment. If I rejected the traditional polytheistic belief and forced the worship of the single god, Aten, the sun disk, this would mean not only the opposition of the priests, but also the entire public and the army. This revolution would overturn thousands of years of Egypt's order, triggering economic and social chaos, Isfit. The decision to build a new capital Amarna and destroy all the statues of the old gods would severely test the limits of my absolute authority. The price of such a reform could be losing my throne and perhaps my own life. International diplomacy was not just a matter of gold and power for me, but also about preserving the prestige of Egypt. I had to maintain a balance of power with militarily strong empires like the Hittites, Mitanni, and Babylon. Egypt's greatest diplomatic card was gold from Nubia. I forged alliances through letters and luxury gifts, gold, ivory, and married my daughters to their kings. This diplomacy was as dangerous as war, for a wrong marriage treaty or an insufficiently sent gold shipment could trigger a major war and lead to the questioning of Egypt's power. My archives showed that Egypt's power was based not only on military strength, but also on gold wealth and strategic marriages. The royal diet was not just about nutrition for me. It was about maintaining sacred purity. My body, like the body of a god, had to be nourished with the best foods. The food was processed according to sacred rules, and I drank clean water and special beers. One of my most important daily rituals was the dressing and makeup, which lasted for hours. The thick black eyeliner kohl around my eyes was not just to protect from the sun, but also to reinforce my divine authority and flawlessness. My hair would be meticulously covered by the Nenes headdress or an elaborate wig. My body was a sacred relic. Hence, the slightest flaw would be perceived as a sign of an impending disaster. Death was not an end for me, but the beginning of a centuries-long project. The construction of my eternity. The parts of my soul, Ka life force, and Ba personality, mobility, had to be protected, requiring the art of mummification and the flawlessness of my tomb complex. My tomb pyramid or valley temple was a portal and an eternal vessel designed for Ka and Ba to return and find my body. Every coffin, every treasure, every protective spell was part of the detailed plan for life after death. My greatest duty was not just to rule Egypt, but to flawlessly construct my own eternity and, in doing so, guarantee the eternity of Egypt itself. My word was the highest judge, and my decisions gave the final form to the laws. This power brought me both respect and great fear. It was my responsibility to settle the people's disputes and prevent bribery and corruption. By issuing royal edicts, I maintained legal order and protected Mat. However, despite this absolute power, I was bound by the weight of traditional laws and the rules of my ancestors. My duty was to dispense justice swiftly and surely, for the people of Egypt believed that the Pharaoh's justice was the earthly reflection of the god's justice. The slightest deviation in one of my decisions could lead to the shaking of Mat. The memory and heart of the state's administration depended on the army of scribes. Scribes meticulously recorded everything from the Nile's floods to tax records, from temple inventories to the results of military campaigns on papyrus. Writing and knowledge were the tangible backbone of my power. Scribes were not just officials, but the intellectual class that preserved Egypt's thousands of years of knowledge. My duty was to keep this army disciplined and ensure the archives were complete. These scribes were the ones who carried my will to all of the two lands. My empire stood less on swords and more on the power of ink and papyrus, for without written records, it was impossible to maintain the order of Mat. Royal propaganda was vital for reinforcing my divine status among the public. This propaganda was the guarantee of my eternal life. The colossal reliefs and hieroglyphs on the temple walls showed my equality with the gods, my war victories, and the abundance I brought to Egypt. In an age when the vast majority of the public was illiterate, this iconography was the primary and effective means of communication between the people and me. My image was always depicted as powerful, young, and invincible. This propaganda was not just a political tool, but a divine assurance that I was upholding Mat. My true, mortal personality would be entirely lost behind the magnificent mask seen by the public. My health was directly linked to the destiny of the entire country. My falling ill was not just a personal problem, but a bad omen that Mat was beginning to break down. Therefore, the best physicians, royal doctors, and healers worked day and night to preserve my health. Physicians not only treated wounds or illnesses, but also performed spiritual and magical protection rituals. For me, receiving treatment was not just about getting better, but about showing the public that my divine power was still intact and that Egypt was still under the protection of the gods. Even the slightest tremor in my health would cause great political tension among the vizier and priestly circles. Preserving the legitimacy of my throne was a battle that continued even after my death. After my death, dynastic crisis and succession struggles were almost inevitable. Chief, viziers, high-ranking priests, and queens would plot to seize the throne. My duty, even while alive, was to anticipate and balance the potential conflicts between my son heir or my queens. My will, all temple rituals, and political appointments had to guarantee the stability of the throne. This was a persistent problem created by human nature and greed that even my divine power could not completely overcome, and it was my greatest fear. In the eyes of the people, the Pharaoh was an object of fear, adoration, and unconditional faith. This was my greatest power and my heaviest burden. The entire public, from slaves to farmers, saw me as a god, protector, and ultimate master. Every appearance of mine was a public spectacle and a divine grace. The people's expectation of me was always absolute abundance and peace. This faith was the source of my absolute power, but the pressure brought by this faith was immense. I could never show weakness, illness, or hesitation. For me, this unconditional adoration from my people was the strongest bond that ensured the stability of the empire, and I would do anything to protect this bond. The true burden of being a pharaoh was ultimate solitude. This solitude was as vast as the pyramids. I was a god to my people and even my family. This isolated me from all mortal human relationships. I was solely responsible for the destiny of an entire civilization, the covenant between us and the gods, and the continuity of cosmic order. There was no one with whom I could share my secrets, my fears, or my human weaknesses. The throne, though the most luxurious place, was also the coldest and loneliest place. For me, the quest for immortality was not just an architectural ambition, but also an eternal escape from this mortal solitude and earthly burden. So that was my life of divine power and solitude as the living god of ancient Egypt. After the clan loyalty of the Vikings, here we saw that the burden of a single person determined the fate of an entire civilization. After this journey, I understood how sacred the separation of powers and individual freedom truly are. Which challenging era should we visit in our next video? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this alternate history journey, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next adventure. Take care and remember, nothing mortal is eternal.